I discovered my husband's plan to poison me through the baby monitor. I called the police just in time, keeping myself and my daughter safe. After exposing his conspiracy, I began a new life with her, slowly finding safety, strength, and hope for a future free from fear. I used to believe that marriage meant safety, that love meant protection, that the person sleeping beside you would never, ever be capable of hurting you. For 10 years, I built my life around Liam Carter, my husband, my partner, my home. We weren't perfect, but we were stable. At least that's what I kept telling myself. When bills piled up, I picked up extra shifts at St. Mary's Hospital. When he said his business just needed a little more time, I smiled and said, I understand. Because that's what a good wife does, right? She sacrifices. That night started like every other night. I had just finished checking a patient's chart when I pulled out my phone. It was 2:17 a.m. I opened the baby monitor app, a small comfort I'd gotten used to during my night shifts. Watching my daughter Ella sleep always calmed me down. She was 6, all curls and innocence, clutching her stuffed rabbit like it was her whole world. But that night, something was different. At first, all I heard was the soft hum of the white noise machine in Ella's room. Then I heard footsteps, not the light ones of a child, heavier, slower. The camera switched briefly as Liam walked past Ella's room. He looked restless. I remember thinking, he should be asleep by now. Then I heard another voice, a woman's. Faint, but clear enough to make my heart skip a beat. At first, I thought maybe the TV was on in the living room. But then I realized the monitor had picked up sound from the hallway, right outside Ella's door. She takes that sleep medicine every night, right? A woman's voice, calm, almost too calm. Liam's voice followed. Yeah, half a pill, sometimes a full one. She trusts me to pour the water. My body went cold. The next words were a blur. My mind refused to believe them at first. The woman said something about dosage, about making it look natural, about not leaving a trace. And then Liam replied, as if he were talking about nothing more serious than fixing a cup of tea. If the dosage is right, no one will question it. She's been exhausted lately. They'll think it's her heart. My throat tightened. I stopped breathing. For a moment, I honestly thought I was dreaming. Maybe I was so tired that I'd imagined it. Maybe it wasn't even Liam's voice. But then I heard him laugh. That same familiar half-laugh I'd heard 1,000 times when he'd tried to charm his way out of a fight. It was him. And he was planning my death. I don't remember sitting down, but I must have, because suddenly I was staring at the hospital floor, my hands trembling so violently I nearly dropped my phone. My mind spun through disbelief, fear, and confusion. Why? Why would he do this? The woman's voice, later I'd recognize it as Chloe Reed's, continued, steady and professional. A few drops will do it. I'll mix it so it dissolves completely. No taste, Knockler. You're sure? Liam asked. Positive, she said. I've done this before, just not for someone I care about. And then, silence. Realized I was crying only when a nurse beside me asked if I was okay. I forced a smile, pretending it was nothing. How could I explain that my husband and another woman were plotting to kill me through a baby monitor? That night changed everything. I wanted to run home, to confront him, to scream, Why, Liam? Why would you do this to me? But some part of me, the part trained to think under pressure, whispered, Don't move. Don't speak. Be smart. I replayed the recording, heart pounding, and hit the little red button that said record. Every breath, every word, every sinister pause, I captured it. It wasn't just shock anymore. It was survival. I sent the file to my personal email, then to my sister's, just in case. If I disappeared, someone had to know the truth. My entire body was shaking, but I couldn't fall apart. Not yet. I called 911. When the dispatcher answered, my voice was barely a whisper. My husband is planning to poison me, I said. Please don't make any noise. My daughter is home with him. The dispatcher's tone shifted instantly. Calm but urgent. Okay, ma'am. Stay where you are. Officers are on their way. Do you have any proof? Yes, I said, swallowing my tears. It's all recorded, on my baby monitor. As soon as I hung up, I opened the live feed again. Liam was pacing now, checking his watch, pouring something into a cup. I watched in horror as he walked down the hall, toward Ella's room, my stomach twisted. I whispered under my breath, "God, please protect her." Minutes felt like hours. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then, through the faint static of the monitor, I saw flashing lights outside the window, red and blue. Sirens in the distance, footsteps, voices. Then the sound of my husband shouting, "What the hell is going on?" The police had arrived. I remember gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was sorrow, a deep, aching sorrow. Because in that moment, I realized something no one wants to believe. The person I trusted with my life had been the one trying to take it. That night, the world didn't just betray me, it woke me up. The sirens faded into the distance, but their echo stayed in my ears long after the call ended. I sat there in the hospital break room, staring at the phone in my trembling hands, trying to convince myself that what I'd just heard, what I'd just witnessed, was real. How do you wrap your mind around something like that? That the man who kissed you goodbye this morning, who told you he loved you, who sent a picture of your daughter eating pancakes, was planning to poison you before the week was over. It didn't feel real. It felt like someone else's nightmare that I had accidentally stepped into. I kept the baby monitor feed open, my heart pounding in sync with the ticking clock above me. I watched the chaos unfold in silent horror as police officers swarmed through the house. Their movements were blurred through the tiny screen. But I saw enough. The flashlights, the confusion, the way Liam raised his hands, his mouth moving fast like he was denying everything. Then the feed cut off. The app crashed. Black screen. I gasped and nearly dropped my phone. The silence that followed was unbearable. Every part of me wanted to call home, but I knew better. I couldn't risk warning him, couldn't risk saying anything that might twist the situation. The dispatcher had told me to stay put until an officer arrived to meet me at the hospital. So I waited. Those 20 minutes felt like 20 years. Every possible thought raced through my head. What if they didn't believe me? What if Liam had already hurt Ella? What if the police came too late? I could barely breathe. Finally, a uniformed officer appeared at the hospital's front desk asking for me. His voice was steady, professional, but there was something in his eyes. That look of pity people get when they already know you're about to break. "And Mrs. Carter?" he said gently. I nodded, barely able to speak. "Your husband is in custody. Your daughter is safe. She's scared, but unharmed." I think I stopped hearing the rest after that. Safe. My little girl was safe. Tears flooded my eyes before I could stop them. I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from sobbing out loud in the quiet hallway. The officer led me to a private room where another detective, a tall, calm man with a notepad, introduced himself as Detective Harris. He spoke carefully, like someone handling a fragile glass about to crack. Mr. Carter, we've reviewed your call and the audio file you sent. We believe you're in immediate danger. We also have officers securing your residence and gathering evidence." I nodded numbly. He was going to poison me," I whispered. "I heard everything." "I know," Harris said. "And because of that recording, you may have just saved your own life." That sentence hit me like a wave. Saved my own life. It didn't feel heroic. It felt terrifying. I kept thinking about the details I'd heard on the recording, the dosage, the timing, the cold precision of it all. It wasn't a moment of rage or passion. It was a plan. Something they'd talked about, practiced prepared for, Chloe, the pharmacist. I remembered her now, her perfect red lipstick, her overly confident laugh at the office dinner, the way she'd touched Liam's arm too casually. I should have seen it. I should have known. Detective Harris asked if I could describe her. I told him everything. The way she sounded, how she pronounced her S like a hiss, how Liam's tone softened every time he said her name. He scribbled in his notebook and said quietly, "We'll find her. I promise you that." But even with his words, I couldn't shake the image of Liam's face from my mind. Calm, charming, pretending. How long had this been going on? Had he been waiting for the perfect moment? For me to get tired enough, distracted enough, to just let my guard down? I felt sick thinking about all the cups of tea he'd made me, all the nights he'd told me, "You should rest, sweetheart." Was it kindness or a test run? When Harris finished his questions, he suggested I take the rest of the night off. But I couldn't go home. The very thought made my stomach twist. That house wasn't mine anymore. It was a crime scene, a place where love had turned into a trap. They arranged for me to stay at a secure location for the night. One of the hospital staff, bless her heart, gave me a blanket and a place to rest in the staff lounge. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Liam's hands, steady, deliberate, pouring something invisible into a glass of water. Around dawn, my phone buzzed. A message from Detective Harris. "Your daughter is with social services for now. You can see her in the morning. We'll need a formal statement." I exhaled shakily, staring out the window as the first light crept over the parking lot. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel like a wife. I felt like a survivor. I thought about how easily it could have gone wrong. If I hadn't checked the monitor, if the Wi-Fi had lagged, if I'd ignored the strange noises. Technology had saved me. A simple baby monitor, something I bought to keep my daughter safe, had protected me too. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd trusted Liam completely, but in the end, it was a piece of plastic and software that told me the truth he never would. I sat there until the sun rose, holding my phone like a lifeline, whispering to myself, "You're alive, Emma. You're still here. Now you fight." That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to cry in silence or pretend it hadn't happened. If Liam had wanted me gone quietly, I was going to make sure the world heard my voice instead. That morning, I called the detective back and said the words that would change everything. "I'm ready to make my statement." They say time slows down when your life is falling apart. I used to think that was just something people said to sound poetic, until that night. When I saw the flashing red and blue lights on my phone screen, everything inside me froze. I was still at the hospital, sitting alone in the dim break room, staring at the baby monitor feed like it was my last connection to reality. I could see the lights reflecting on the living room window of our house. Police officers were moving across the frame, quick, silent, purposeful. And there was Liam, pacing near the couch, his face twisted in confusion. For a brief, foolish moment, I almost pitied him. He looked so lost, so unaware of what was coming. But then I remembered the words I'd heard through that same monitor. "If the dosage is right, no one will question it." And all pity turned to ice. The next few seconds were chaos. The front door flew open. Officers rushed in. Liam turned, startled, shouting something I couldn't make out. And then the screen went black. The feed disconnected. I screamed before I could stop myself. My phone clattered to the floor. The nurse on duty ran in, alarmed. "Emma, what happened?" she asked. But I couldn't speak. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. Was Ella okay? Did they get to her in time? What if he'd panicked? Done something desperate before they reached her room? Those 10 minutes, the longest 10 minutes of my life, felt like drowning with my eyes open. Every second stretched endlessly, filled with horrible possibilities. I could see her face in my mind, her little hands clutching her teddy bear, her soft curls against the pillow. I'd left her there thinking she was safe, and now she was in the middle of something no child should ever experience. I prayed, not in words, not in form, just a desperate, soundless plea. "Please, God, please, just let her be okay." When my phone finally rang, I jumped. It was Detective Harris. "Mrs. Carter, it's over," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Your daughter is safe. She's been removed from the house. Your husband is in custody." For a few seconds, I couldn't respond. I just sat there, tears streaming down my cheeks, whispering thank you over and over. The relief hit me so hard it made me dizzy. My body went limp, like all the tension I'd been holding in finally broke loose. I slid down the wall, pressing the phone to my chest. Safe. She was safe. That was the only thing that mattered. But when the relief passed, something else took its place. A hollow kind of ache. Because now I had to face what came next. I wasn't just a nurse anymore, or a mother. I was the wife of a man who had tried to kill me. The thought felt too big to fit inside my head. An hour later, Detective Harris arrived at the hospital to speak with me in person. He was composed, polite, but his eyes carried the kind of heaviness that only comes from seeing too much of the world's cruelty. He offered me coffee, which I couldn't drink. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Your husband didn't resist," he said quietly. "He tried to talk his way out of it, said it was all a misunderstanding, a joke. But the recording you sent leaves little doubt. We also found several containers of prescription medication in your kitchen, unmarked." My stomach churned. "He was really going to do it?" I whispered. "Yes, ma'am," he said softly. "It looks that way." That confirmation broke something inside me. It was like my brain had been clinging to this tiny, desperate hope that maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe it was a cruel joke. Maybe it wasn't real. But it was, and that truth settled over me like cold water. Detective Harris continued, asking for details, about the recording, about Liam and Chloe's relationship, about anything that might help the case. I answered every question automatically, my voice robotic, detached. Somewhere between the words motive and evidence, I realized I was describing the man I once loved like he was a stranger. When the questions ended, I finally asked, "Can I see my daughter?" He nodded. "She's with one of our child specialists for now. We'll take you to her as soon as she's cleared." The drive to the precinct was quiet. The city was still waking up. The early morning fog clinging to the streets, people rushing to work, completely unaware that my world had just imploded. I kept replaying memories in my head. The birthday dinners, the movie nights, the morning texts that used to make me smile. Every good moment now felt poisoned by the knowledge of what he was capable of. When we reached the station, I saw Ella through the glass window of a small interview room. She was sitting with a female officer, clutching a cup of hot chocolate, her teddy bear on her lap. Her eyes looked too big for her face. Scared, but brave. The moment she saw me, she jumped up and ran into my arms. I held her so tightly I could barely breathe. She smelled like vanilla and safety. I didn't want to let go. "Mommy," she whispered. "Why were the police at our house? Did Daddy do something bad?" I didn't know how to answer. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her father almost ended your life? So I just said, "Daddy's sick, baby. But you're safe now. Mommy's here," and that was enough for her. She lay her head on my shoulder and fell asleep, exhausted. I looked up and saw Detective Harris watching from the doorway. He gave me a small nod, the kind people give when words would only make things worse. For the first time since that awful night began, I felt something like peace. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't relief. It was simply this. I was alive, and my daughter was safe. As I stroked Ella's hair, I whispered to myself, "He wanted me gone. But I'm still here, and I meant it, not as a statement of luck, but of promise. Because I knew from that moment on, I would never be the same woman again." The days after Liam's arrest felt like living inside a fog that wouldn't lift. Even when I closed my eyes, I could still hear the echo of his voice, calm, calculating, plotting my death. It replayed like a broken record in the back of my mind, every word cutting deeper than the last. I was staying at my sister's house for safety. Every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. Every sound from the baby monitor, now placed beside Ella's bed, sent my heart racing. I couldn't shake the paranoia, the sense that somehow, even from his cell, Liam could still reach me. But the hardest part wasn't fear. It was the disbelief. How could the man who once brushed my hair out of my face while I gave birth to our daughter, the man who whispered, "I'll always protect you," be the same one who tried to end my life? I thought I'd run out of tears, but they came anyway. Silently, constantly, when no one was watching. Detective Harris called me 3 days later. "Mrs. Carter, we've uncovered some financial activity you need to be aware of," he said. His tone was careful, too careful, and that alone made my stomach twist. When I arrived at the precinct, he led me into a small office filled with files and computer monitors. The air smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. He motioned for me to sit, then slid a folder across the table. "Your husband has been busy," he said grimly. Inside were copies of bank statements, withdrawals, transfers, insurance documents, all in Liam's name. I blinked, struggling to make sense of the numbers. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "He drained nearly $80,000 from your joint account over the last 6 months," Harris explained. He also took out 3 life insurance policies, all naming himself as the sole beneficiary. The most recent one was taken out just 2 weeks ago. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was premeditation. He hadn't acted in anger or impulse. He had planned everything, calculated, documented, and signed his name on it. Harris leaned forward, his eyes filled with sympathy. "I know this is hard to hear, but it's important you understand. The motive wasn't love gone wrong. It was greed." Greed. Such a small word for something so monstrous. I stared at the papers, each signature in Liam's familiar handwriting like a wound. We used to sit together at the kitchen table, paying bills, planning vacations we could never afford. He would kiss my hand and joke, "You're the responsible one, Em. I'd be lost without you." Now I knew what he really meant. He wasn't lost without me. He just needed to get rid of me. Tears blurred the ink on the page. I wiped them away angrily. I didn't want to cry for him anymore. As I sat there, I remembered little things that suddenly made sense. The late-night business calls, the new perfume on his shirt, the missing savings, the way he'd started avoiding my eyes. Every red flag I'd ignored lined up in front of me like flashing signs I'd chosen not to see. Harris broke the silence. We also confirmed that his accomplice, Chloe Benson, the pharmacist, has been detained. She's admitted to supplying him with the medication he planned to use. My stomach turned. Chloe. I'd met her once, months ago, at one of Liam's work events. She'd been polite, smiling, the kind of woman who wore red lipstick and confidence-like armor. I remember how she'd laughed at his jokes, how easily they'd stood too close. And I, naive, trusting, had brushed it off. Now the memory burned. "She knew about Ella," I whispered. "She knew he was married, that I existed." "Yes," Harris said quietly. "She didn't care." That simple truth hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't just betrayed by Liam, I'd been erased, reduced to an obstacle between him and whatever future he imagined. I left the station that day with a folder full of evidence and a heart full of bitterness. The world outside felt colder, sharper. Even there was hard to breathe. When I got home, Ella was coloring at the kitchen table. She looked up and smiled, her little face lighting up like sunshine through rain. "Look, Mommy," she said, holding up a drawing of a house with 2 stick figures, me and her, standing under a rainbow. There was no Daddy in the picture. Something inside me cracked open then. Not in pain, but in clarity. Maybe she understood more than I thought. Maybe, in her own innocent way, she was already learning to live without him. That night, after she went to bed, I sat alone by the window, the police file open on my lap. For the first time, I forced myself to listen to the recording again. Liam's voice was calm, steady, chillingly casual. "She won't feel a thing," he'd said. I pressed pause and whispered back into the darkness, "Neither will I." Because I realized something important that night. Survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about reclaiming what was taken from you. Your peace, your dignity, your truth. I made a promise to myself then and there. I would testify. I would face him in court, not because I needed revenge, but because I needed closure. I wanted him to look me in the eyes and see the woman he couldn't destroy. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted him to know that the same technology he used to plan my death had become the thing that saved my life. As I turned off the baby monitor that night, I caught my reflection in the dark screen. My eyes looked different, tired but fierce. For the first time in weeks, I didn't see a victim. I saw a survivor preparing for war. The courthouse smelled like old paper and rain. It was one of those gray mornings when the world felt heavy, like even the sky couldn't stand to watch what was about to unfold. I sat in the witness waiting area, my palms slick with sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone around me could hear it. This wasn't just a courtroom. It was a battlefield, and I was about to face the man who'd tried to kill me. When Detective Harris told me the trial was officially set, I'd spent nights convincing myself I was ready. I practiced my answers, memorized the details, and even rehearsed breathing exercises my therapist had suggested. But none of it prepared me for the moment the courtroom doors opened, and Liam walked in. He looked nothing like the man I married. His once perfect hair was disheveled, his suit wrinkled, his eyes empty but cold. For a fleeting second, I searched for the person I used to love. The one who kissed my forehead when I was sick, who read bedtime stories to Ella. But he wasn't there. All that remained was a hollow stranger. Chloe sat 2 rows behind him, her face pale, her expression stiff and emotionless. She didn't look at me once, not even when our eyes almost met. Maybe she was ashamed, or maybe she wasn't. I didn't know anymore. The prosecutor, Ms. Turner, was sharp, confident, and unflinching, everything I needed her to be. When she stood, her voice filled the room with quiet authority. "This case," she began, "is not about jealousy or anger. It is about greed, deceit, and the calculated attempt of one man to murder his wife, a woman who trusted him completely." Her words struck the air like thunder. Liam shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening. I felt every eye in the courtroom turn toward me, and I suddenly wanted to disappear. When it was finally my turn to testify, my knees trembled as I stood. I made my way to the witness stand, clutching the small silver locket around my neck. Inside was a picture of Ella, smiling with her missing front tooth. That was my anchor. For her, I had to stay strong. After swearing in, I took a deep breath and began. "My name is Emma Carter. I'm a nurse at St. Jude's Hospital. I've been married to Liam Carter for 8 years. Or I was, until I discovered he was planning to kill me." My voice cracked on that last line. The room went still, silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Ms. Turner nodded gently, encouraging me to continue. I told them everything: the baby monitor, the late-night conversation, the recording, the call to 911. Every detail that had replayed in my nightmares came spilling out like a confession. When the recording was played aloud, I couldn't stop shaking. Liam's voice filled the courtroom, calm, confident, evil. Hearing it again, surrounded by strangers, made it even worse. It wasn't just my private horror anymore. It was evidence. The jurors stared at him with a mix of shock and disgust. He didn't flinch. Not once. When it was the defense attorney's turn, the tone changed. He approached the stand, smiling faintly, the kind of smile that hides knives behind it. "Mrs. Carter," he began smoothly, "you've been under a lot of stress, haven't you? Long night shifts, raising a child, financial strain. Isn't it possible that what you heard that night was simply misinterpreted?" I wanted to laugh. "Misinterpreted? A conversation about dosages and death?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm a nurse. I know exactly what I heard," he smirked. "But your husband insists it was just a dark joke, a misunderstanding between adults. You wouldn't say you're overreacting?" That word, overreacting, hit a nerve so deep I almost snapped. For years, Liam had used that same word to silence me. Whenever I felt something was wrong, he'd say it. Whenever I cried, whenever I questioned him. And now, here it was again, weaponized Adina courtroom. I straightened in my seat and met the lawyer's gaze head on. "No," I said clearly. "I'm reacting exactly as someone would after discovering her husband wanted her dead." The room went silent again. Even the judge looked at me with quiet respect. From the corner of my eye, I saw Liam's face twist. Not with guilt, but with anger. For the first time I saw his mask slip. The charming, polished husband was gone. All that was left was the man behind the plan. When my testimony ended, I stepped down, my legs trembling but my head held high. As I passed Liam, he muttered something under his breath. I couldn't hear it, but I didn't care. Whatever he said no longer had power over me. The rest of the trial unfolded like a slow storm. Evidence, witnesses, cross-examinations, every piece of the puzzle revealing how deeply his deception ran. The financial fraud, the insurance policies, Chloe's involvement. When Chloe took the stand, her voice was flat. She admitted to supplying the poison, but claimed Liam had manipulated her, promising to leave me for her. Watching her cry on the stand didn't stir a single ounce of sympathy in me. Maybe she regretted it now, but regret doesn't undo evil. After 2 exhausting weeks, the jury finally returned with its verdict. The judge's voice rang through the courtroom. "We find the defendant, Liam Carter, guilty on all counts, including conspiracy to commit murder." It was over. As the gavel struck, the room erupted in murmurs. I sat frozen, barely able to process the sound of those words. Guilty. For months, I had lived in fear that no one would believe me, that somehow his charm and lies would win again. But justice, real, undeniable justice, had been served. As they led Liam away in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time. His eyes were cold, empty, and for the first time I didn't feel fear. I felt free. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted my name, flashing cameras in my face. I didn't answer a single question. I just held Ella's hand tightly and whispered, "It's over, baby. We're safe now." But deep inside, I knew safety wasn't something you returned to. It was something you rebuilt, slowly, painfully, one breath at a time. They say once a storm passes, the world feels cleaner, the air lighter, the silence deeper. But after my storm, the silence was terrifying. Because when everything you've known is destroyed, what's left isn't peace, it's emptiness. It had been 3 months since the trial. 3 months since I heard the word guilty echo through that courtroom. Liam was sentenced to life without parole. Chloe's 12 years. Old justice was done. But the weight of survival doesn't disappear when the gavel falls. Ella and I moved to a small coastal town in Maine, far away from the house that had become a crime scene, far from memories that cut like glass. The ocean was supposed to be healing. That's what people said. But for the first few weeks, every sound of the waves crashing reminded me of that night, of panic, of noise, of drowning in fear. Still, I tried to build something new. We rented a little cottage on the edge of town. White walls, blue shutters, a garden with wildflowers that refused to die no matter how harsh the wind blew. I found work at the local clinic. Quiet, steady work. Ella started school again. She was shy at first, hiding behind me every morning. But kids are resilient in ways adults forget. Within a month, she had new friends, a favorite teacher, and a backpack full of drawings that always seemed to feature sunshine. I wish I could say I healed as quickly as she did. But trauma doesn't fade. It lingers, like a bruise under the skin. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I heard his voice whispering from the dark. Other nights, I'd check the baby monitor over and over, even though I knew she was safe. Old habits die hard, especially the ones born from fear. One evening, after putting Ella to bed, I sat by the ocean with a cup of tea. The sunset painted the water gold, and the air smelled of salt and pine. For the first time in a long while, I let myself breathe, really breathe. The sea roared like it was trying to tell me something. Maybe that endings could also be beginnings. That's when I started writing. Not for anyone else, just for me. I opened a blank notebook and began with one line. I survived the man who tried to erase me. The words felt heavy, raw, but freeing. Every night after that, I wrote a little more. Memories, fragments, reflections. It became my therapy, my release. The pages began to fill with not just pain, but also small victories. Ella's laughter at breakfast. The first time I slept through the night without checking the door. The day I planted roses and didn't think about him once. Healing, I realized, wasn't a single moment. It was thousands of small ones. One afternoon, while picking up Ella from school, her teacher stopped me. "Your daughter drew something for you," she said with a gentle smile. The picture showed our little cottage by the sea, me, her, and a huge sun in the corner. Across the top, in shaky handwriting, she'd written, "Me, Mommy, and safe and happy." I felt tears sting my eyes, not the kind that burned, but the kind that healed. That night, I framed the drawing and hung it above her bed. a reminder that no matter what we'd been through, love had survived. But moving on wasn't just about memory. It was about trust, something I didn't think I'd ever feel again. So when someone new came into my life, I didn't know what to do with it. His name was Daniel. He was a paramedic at the clinic. Quiet, kind, and gentle in the way people are when they've seen too much pain themselves. He never pried, never asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. He just showed up, with coffee on cold mornings, with help fixing a leaky sink, with stories that made Ella laugh until she hiccuped. At first, I kept my distance. I wasn't ready to trust anyone, not after Liam. But Daniel was patient. He never pushed. He simply reminded me that kindness could still exist without motive. One night, while washing dishes, he said softly, "You know, Emma, surviving isn't just about staying alive. It's about learning to live again." Something about the way he said it stayed with me, maybe because it was true. I'd survived the worst. But now I had to learn how to be happy again. That was the hardest part. Over time, laughter returned to our home. Real laughter, not the forced kind that hides cracks beneath it. We baked cookies that burned at the edges, sang badly to old songs, and built sandcastles that collapsed with the tide. And for the first time in years, I caught myself smiling without guilt. Still, there were nights when I'd look at the stars and feel the ache of what was lost. Not because I missed Liam, but because I missed the version of myself who once believed life was simple. I was never going to be that woman again, but maybe that was okay. Maybe strength is born in the breaking. As I tucked Ella into bed one night, she looked up at me sleepily and asked, "Mommy, are we happy now?" I thought about it for a long moment. The fear, the courtrooms, the ocean outside that had once sounded like a threat, but now felt like music. "Yes," I whispered. "We're getting there, and I meant it, because happiness doesn't come all at once. It comes slowly, in the laughter of a child, in the quiet of a safe home, in the morning light that filters through the curtains and reminds you that you made it to another day." And as I watched her drift off to sleep, I realized something else. The same courage that once saved me was now building something new, a life that was mine again. I turned off the baby monitor one last time, smiled at my reflection in the dark screen, and whispered, "We're free." It's been a year since the trial, one full, relentless, miraculous year. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Other times, it feels like another lifetime entirely. I no longer wake up expecting the darkness to return. The nightmares still come, but they don't own me anymore. I've learned that healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about remembering without breaking. Our little house by the sea has become a sanctuary. The walls that once echoed with fear now hum with laughter. Ella's giggles fill the mornings, and the scent of coffee and salt water fills the air. I've started to sleep with the windows open. I used to be afraid of the sounds outside, the creak of the wind, the shifting of the waves. But now, they feel like the world breathing with me. Every morning, I walk along the shoreline while Ella plays in the sand. I watch the tide roll in and out, like time itself washing everything clean. There's something sacred about that rhythm. Something that reminds me that even when the world shatters, it can rebuild itself, piece by piece. People in town still whisper about me sometimes. They know my story, most of them do. They look at me with that mix of pity and admiration people give survivors. I used to hate it. I didn't want to be the woman whose husband tried to kill her. But now I see it differently. Because if my story makes one woman trust her instincts, one person call for help, or one heart believe in survival again, then it's worth it. I've begun volunteering at a women's shelter once a week. The first time I walked through the doors, I froze. The room was filled with faces that looked too familiar, women with haunted eyes and trembling hands. But when I started talking, when I told them what I'd lived through, something shifted. The silence in the room softened. Hope moved quietly between us. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone can save you. I started telling them what I learned the hard way. That love is not supposed to make you afraid. That control isn't care. That silence is the weapon of every abuser. And that even in the darkest hour, you have more strength than you think. One night after a meeting, a young woman hugged me tightly and whispered, "You made me believe I can survive too." those words undid me. Because once, not long ago, I was her. And now, somehow, I had become proof that life goes on. Daniel's still in our lives. Slowly, carefully, we've built something fragile but real. A friendship that feels like sunlight. He doesn't fill the silence. He shares it. Sometimes that's all healing really needs. Someone who understands that your scars aren't stories to fix, but truths to honor. Last weekend, we took Ella to the local fair. She rode the carousel 3 times, her laughter carried away by the wind. Watching her spin, her hair flying, I realized I hadn't thought of Liam in days. Not with anger, not with pain, just distance. He doesn't haunt me anymore. He's part of my story, but not the end of it. That night, after Ella fell asleep, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and my old baby monitor in my lap. It doesn't work anymore. The screen is cracked and the battery is dead, but I kept it all this time. The little device that once showed me my nightmare and somehow saved my life. I looked at its dark screen and whispered, "You heard the worst of my world, and you helped me find the truth." Then I walked down to the beach and set it gently in the sand. The tide came in slowly, brushing over it like a goodbye. I didn't need it anymore. For the first time in years, I felt safe without watching over my shoulder. The stars hung low that night, bright, endless, patient. I tilted my face toward them and let the wind carry my tears away. Not tears of fear, not grief. Peace, simple, quiet peace. I've come to understand something. Something I wish I could tell the woman I used to be. You don't have to be fearless to survive. You just have to keep moving, even when your heart trembles and your voice shakes, because survival isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just choosing to wake up and try again. Before going to bed, I checked on Ella one last time. She was asleep, her small hand clutching her teddy bear, her breathing soft and steady. I watched her for a long time, my heart full. This quiet, ordinary moment, what was everything I had fought for. I leaned down and whispered, "We made it, baby. We really made it." And for the first time, those words didn't feel like a prayer. They felt like the truth. As I turned off the light, I caught my reflection in the window. The faint outline of a woman I barely recognized. Stronger, softer, whole. Not defined by what broke her, but by what she built after. Outside, the waves whispered against the shore, steady and eternal. And in that sound, I heard the one thing I'd been chasing for so long. Not fear, not grief, not even survival. Just peace. Final ending lines. I am not the woman he tried to destroy. I am the woman who lived, who loved again, who laughed again, and who finally learned that even from the darkest night, dawn always comes.